Rhett Palmer.
The mayor of the airwaves is ready to go. Talking to people you want to know.
Face to face.
One-on-one. Get the story and have some fun
With Rhett Palmer.
And now, the most trusted name in radio, Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves.
Today's broadcast is brought to you by Center for Advanced Eye Care. Genuinely dedicated eye surgeons, eye doctors that will take care of you. Center for Advanced Eye Care. When my mom was on earth, that's where I sent her. That's where I go. That's where my wife goes. That's everybody that I love goes. Center for Advanced Eye Care. Okay, we have Sydney Lea on the line again. Good morning, sir.
Good to see you again, Rhett.
Yeah, where are you geographically now? Are you back up in Maine, or where are you?
No, we're in Vermont until very early June. Then
Where
we'll be
where in
back.
Vermont?
A town called Newbury, which is over on the Connecticut River, right on the New Hampshire border, about 25 miles south of St. Johnsbury, Vermont.
I wish you would spend a little more time there because I'm going to go see a friend in Nashua in a couple of weeks. He just flew in last night to Nashua from here, was visiting.
Nashua, New Hampshire?
Yes, sir.
That's not very close to us at all, but
But going over the border isn't it, or no?
Well, you cross the border way south of us. We're only about 70 miles south of the Quebec border here.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you this. Now, I live in Florida, which is completely different than Maine. So I go up to Maine, I go up to Vermont. You can see the difference. But you already live up there. Why would you spend your summers in Maine as opposed to Vermont? I mean, it's kind of the same territory.
Well, no, it's very, very different. I'm surrounded here by small mountains. Up there, it's dense hardwood forest, largely flat country. Its great appeal is that it has any number of beautiful, pristine, drinkable lakes. So we spend a lot of time on the water.
Oh, okay.
Fishing, kayaking, canoeing, what have you.
Now, this is not you on the cover.
No, that's an older man I knew very, very well from that part of the world, and he is part of a composite character who's one of the two main ones in this novel called Now Look, and he's feeding a loon in one of those lakes I just referred to, with a little looks like a small white perch that he must have caught on a line or something.
He's feeding a loon?
Yep.
I can't see that. Okay.
Lower left-hand corner.
Yeah, my eyes are not that good. Oh, I see the loon down there. Yeah, I was doing my show from Canada. I used to have a place up in Canada on Lake of Bays, and I remember, and somebody, the author I'm with is down in Texas. He says, "I swear I just heard a loon." I said, "Yeah, well, I don't tell the people because I don't want people to get envious of me, but I'm up here in cool, crisp, wonderful Canada." And I said, I do my show on the front porch mornings in the summer, and but anyway, so there's nothing like the sound of the loon up there.
It's haunting, yeah.
Why this book?
The old folks up there, they had a way with language. And that lonesome sound that they make, they call that calling the wind, because loons can't get airborne unless they have some headwind, just like an airplane. They need that for liftoff because they're so heavy. So when they make that sound, the natives say, well, they're calling the wind.
Now, I'm a great believer in God. I believe in Jesus as my Messiah. I'm not so sure. Are you atheist? Are you agnostic? If you don't mind me asking you, where do you stand with all that? Because what amazes me, okay, tell me what you are first, and then I'll say what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm a Christian and a member of our local congregational church.
Oh, you are? Okay. Because I just think of the loon. I think of all the variety. The Bible says the fool has said in his heart there is no God. And when you living up there, I mean, just everything is evidence.
Yeah.
From a firefly, the marvel of a firefly, to a chameleon that can change its colors, it just amazes me.
We don't have much in the way of chameleons, but I'm sure you people do.
Yeah. So anyway, why this book now? What is your why did you write this book, New Look? What's it about?
Now Look. Well, in 1989, a Scribner published a novel of mine called A Place in Mind. And I decided I wanted to write a sequel, and I sort of didn't get around to it. And then I started it in 1997, and I would go back to it, and then I go back to writing poetry, or I go back to it, then I go back to writing essays. And finally, the pandemic arrived, and I said, this is a good time. If there's any upside to this, it's that you can just sit down and finish these projects that you have in mind. And one of them is a book of essays that came out in January, and another one is this novel. It's 35 years after the first one, but it's set in the same spot, different characters. But there's a sense in which the place is almost a character in its own right.
Now, it says here emotional trauma inflicted upon addiction's victims. So you broached the subject of addiction at this point.
I did. And just long story short, the two principal, there are a whole bunch of characters, but the two principal ones are a fancily educated young man who, on a whim, upon graduation, on a drunken whim, just points his car north, has a tent and a cheap old aluminum canoe, and he ends up at this particular place where he runs into an older man, not dissimilar to the one who's on the cover of the book, and they become improbably great friends. He's a person who probably went through 8th grade, I suspect. He was a river driver, one of those daring and skilled people that follow logs down the river to the ocean. Very nimble and agile, and it's a very dangerous trade. But they become really good friends. And in fact, I became very good friends with the man on the cover here. And as I got into recovery, sadly, after an almost unthinkable series of personal tragedies on his part, he began to go the other way. And needless to say, the younger man is deeply disturbed by this, and that's as far as I'll go. You want to know the rest of it, you got to read the book.
So you use fiction as a vehicle to express the intricacies of addiction and the fruition thereof.
Well, yeah, I do. In this instance, I certainly do. And I know whereof I speak, both about the addiction and recovery from it. I also know the part of the motive of this book, I think, is to preserve an oral culture which is really gone now. I went to that part of where my dad had been in the Forest Service up in that part of the world before he went in the Army and subsequently to World War II. And he took us on a canoe trip there in 1953, and I've been going back ever since. And he finally bought a place in 1964, which, and I haven't missed a summer there since. I bought my own little place for $500.
That's great.
Beautiful waterfall.
When did you buy that?
1967.
Oh, okay.
And at any rate, we've just come back from there. We were there for 3 weeks very recently. But I'm old enough. I'm 81. That when I first went there, and for quite a few years after, I knew men and women who had lived there, almost all lumberjacks, and the women, it would be ludicrous to describe them as housewives. They had no conveniences. They worked just as hard as the men did. Yeah. And they were there before there were any power tools, before there was any electricity. In fact, electricity didn't arrive until 1958. And so in order to entertain one another, they had the only resource they had were one another. And they were all these terrific storytellers, and their voices echo in my head all the time. I mean, literally every day, I can hear them. It's as if they were with me, so deeply entrenched in my psyche are they. And they had more influence on me as a writer than any course I ever took as an academic or taught as an academic. The way they crafted language, the way they shaped a story, and so on. No matter what my genre, I'm conscious of their influence whenever I produce something.
And why do you think that is? I mean, these are people that were not highly educated, right?
No, but given the circumstances, as I say, they couldn't even turn on a radio to listen to a show for entertainment, so they made their own. They had
Thinking.
variety shows about every Saturday in which people would play music or stand up and recite poetry, largely satirical, gently of their neighbors, a little less so of their bosses, or told stories. But they also told stories instinctively. I listened to them in kitchens and lumber camps and around campfires and in canoes and what have you. That they were just great raconteurs.
You said satire, and you're right. I can see where in a community that would give levity, but also it's like if somebody who works with me were to do a satire or a limerick about me, we're going to laugh, and then I'm going to go, wow, I didn't. It somehow brings to light. It's a great catalyst for growth. Would you not agree?
I think so. I don't know that I've ever been. I guess this is an open invitation. I don't know that I've ever been the object of satire, written or recorded, but I can see where that might be so. There's 70 full-time residents in that village now, and one described recently said, we're a small town where we fight with each other 24/7 and love our neighbors. So you can't go overboard, with the satire. As I say, it was gentle satire of the neighbors. Perhaps the bosses who were collecting the money for all the timber that they were cutting, maybe it was a little bit less gentle. But you have to get along in a circumstance like that. It's a feud in a town of that size is pretty explosive.
Now you weaved addiction and sobriety into the pages of this new book, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so how long? What? Now, I didn't begin drinking till I was 55, till my mother died, a relationship ended. I had a very short, someone said, a very short, glorious run. I got addicted within a matter of months to Glenlivet Scotch and could not live without it, and then had a miraculous encounter with the Lord, and then he delivered me into the rooms of the 12-step rooms, and that was 14 years ago. One of the best things that ever happened to me as far as breaking me and hopefully making me a better man, maybe a little humbler, I hope. What age did you start? Was it alcohol? Was that your addiction?
Primarily,
Yeah.
yes. And if you count breast milk, I guess I started at 81 years ago. I got serious about it pretty darn early. In my teens, I was not drinking like my other friends were. We'd steal beer and they'd get a kind of a kick out of it. And I couldn't. I went out, I stole a bottle of wine at my uncle's farm. He was away. And the hired man's son was my best friend. We went out and drank this. And the next thing I knew, we had wakened up in a stubble field, strafed by mosquitoes. I was covered in vomit. So was he. He said, I'll never do this again. That's awful. And he never did, so far as I know. And insanely, it's an insanity. I couldn't wait to do it again. And it got increasingly worse as I got older.
It's bizarre. Addiction is really quite bizarre because, those who have not been in that circle think that someone is. I have a friend of mine right now. He's been in and out of jail, in and out of jail. I won't spend any time with him because he's a thief and he's done a lot of bad things. But he's actually has a great sense of humor and he has a great heart hidden underneath it. But he's that. What do you call it when they have to take the pills for the imbalance of bipolar,
yeah,
and all kinds of stuff, and
Well, yeah, it's mysterious. I think I choose to regard it as a disease, as the 12-step people tend to do, and it's just a disease to which some people are more liable than others, and moral pleading never worked with me. I mean, well, why don't you exercise your willpower? My willpower never helped me cure a common
Okay,
cold.
at what age did you become sober, and how did that happen?
Well, I did at 34, and then unfortunately, after about 14 years,
Oh,
I went out for some further research, but it's been 23 years since
so
I got
now,
back into
so
into it.
23 minus 80 is 50, 50 something. You got
50,
sober.
59,
59?
50, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, how do you feel about this? Now, I'm 70 now, and when you say you're 81, I used to think 80 was old. It's funny the older you get, though, because I have a friend of mine. He's about to turn 98, June 4th, and he still runs his real estate firm. And matter of fact, said last year he made more dough last year than he made any year of his entire life doing real estate.
Well, you know,
98.
I believe 81 is old, but it's funny because my grandmother lived with us, or rather, we lived with her. It was her house. My parents and 5 kids. It was a big old rambling house, and she lived to be 98. And we, so I had a very skewed notion of what age was. I hear somebody was 70, so well, they're not very old.
Yeah.
80, that's not very old. And the funny thing was that she was her church ran it was called the House of Rest. It was a retirement home for women, and she would go. She was the chair of the board, and she'd come back and she said, "Oh, the poor old women, this one, that, and that one had this ailment or that ailment." And then she dragooned me and my brother down to a Christmas party there where we were obliged to play the harmonica and entertain these old folks. And we realized that they were all a good deal younger than she was. So that was kind of amusing. I don't think so.
Okay, I got to remember a couple of things I wanted to ask you. One thing is you mentioned something about oral culture.
Yeah.
What do you mean by oral culture?
Well, in a society where literacy is really at a premium, and this is true throughout the world. I read a book called "On an Irish Island" about the island of Great Blasket, now uninhabited off the coast of Ireland, and I was amazed at how similar that culture was to the one that I knew up in Maine. That is to say, lore is passed along by way of mouth, by way of story, by way of narration, as opposed to on the page or on the tape recorder.
Oral history. So
Exactly. But also, I mean, a great deal of it is as I say, is entertainment. I came later along for reasons I won't bog you down with, but I came to co-edit a collection of African folk tales that had never been put on paper with a Zambian friend of mine. And I could say the same thing, in that society where narration is primary, there's a lot of commonality, and it doesn't really matter if the stories are, quote, true or untrue. Most are a mixture of true and fancy. And they become a kind of community property. They're told by a
yeah.
number of people. And it's always interesting. It was always interesting when one would tell a story to see what he or she would emphasize in terms of details, as opposed to the ones that were emphasized by the prior teller.
Let me ask you this now. I'm going to talk about. At the age of 68, I went back to college recently. I dropped out at 8th grade, and then I got my GED. But here at 60, I go back for 2 years. I was on the dean's list for both semesters I was in there during COVID.
Congratulations.
Yeah, but what amazes me is I go, well, wait a second, because all the young people right now, my wife keeps telling me, I said, I can't do this on the computer. She says, well, everybody does it by trial and error. So like I had a young pastor in here yesterday. He's 36 years of age. I marvel at his patience because that's how they were reared. I've got Noah sitting across the glass here, 25, 26 years of age. He can find out anything on the internet. The only thing is it is a solitude or a solitary experience for them. Whereas when I just went back to college, I go, how come we know we can get anything on YouTube, but people will pay a lot of dough to go to college and have a professor, because the professor can speak to you for 1 hour and you're going to get limited information, but for some reason it sticks. Whereas if you read not read a book, but if you're on the computer so why do we, that's why this oral history thing works. Somehow when you put the human element, like for instance, you and I both got sober years ago. I didn't get sober because of a program. I got sober because of a fellowship with God and man, my fellow man. And that saved my proverbial ass.
We're showing our age, but I nothing you've just said would I contradict for even an instant. The whole cybernetic revolution has certainly had its virtues. It's improved certain aspects of medical care, for example, and if I need to know something quickly, I can find it on the internet.
It's amazing.
But I think it is increasingly isolating. That people. People talk about, I'm not on Facebook, for example, as so many are. And people say, well, I have Facebook friends. And I say, well, my friend, I have living friends who are flesh and blood, whom I visit and have lunch with and hang out with and drink coffee with and swap stories with. And I prefer that.
Well, my former secretary, who was with me for 10 years, producer, whatever, she said, Jody, she said, you think those people on Facebook are your friends. They're not your friends. Well, listen, we're out of time for today. Believe it or not, we just flew by. The title of your book, again, is New Look. Now Look. And Now Look. And if you were to say essentially what is this book about, that why someone should pick it up, what they're going to get out of reading it?
Well, there's an insider's look at addiction, as we've implied, and there's also an insider's look at a way of life that once did exist and never will again, but it was pretty fabulous and pretty heroic in many ways.
Well, that sounds, going back and glorifying the riches of relation and oral history.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. We don't want to lose that.
No,
we don't want to lose that. Sydney, it's fun talking to you. And
always a pleasure, Rhett.
Yeah,
hope we'll do it again.
Yeah, don't be a stranger. Hopefully again this summer we'll chat.
Take care.
Okay. God bless you, Sydney. Thank you.